Have you ever met someone and within moments it feels like the air between you thickens, like gravity itself has changed its pull? You look into their eyes and feel something ancient awaken. It's not just attraction, it's recognition, as if you've known them across lifetimes, as if your souls remember something your mind has forgotten. You call it chemistry, you call it fate, but Carl Jung called it something else. He called it a psychic event, the moment your unconscious meets its reflection in another. Because sometimes, that instant connection that feels like destiny isn't the meeting of two souls. It's the collision of two shadows. Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But not every transformation is gentle. Some burn. Some consume everything they touch. And that's what we call chemistry. That wild, intoxicating force that makes you forget logic, time, and even yourself. But what if that spark isn't proof of love? What if it's proof of unhealed parts calling out for recognition?" You see, Jung believed that we don't fall in love with people, we fall in love with the parts of ourselves we've buried, projected onto their faces. When a man meets a woman who embodies his forgotten sensitivity, his neglected intuition, or his inner chaos, it feels like magic. When a woman meets a man who mirrors her suppressed strength or her wounded animus, it feels like coming home. But it's not home. It's the shadow's mirage, the illusion of completion through another person. That's why chemistry feels so electric, so familiar, and so dangerous. Because it is familiar. It's the energy of the unresolved, the unfinished business of your psyche finding form in someone else's eyes. And it's also why these connections are often the hardest to let go of. They trigger your deepest desires and your deepest fears. They pull at the roots of your identity. They promise wholeness but often lead to heartbreak. You think you've met the one. But in truth, you've met the mirror. The one who embodies everything you've denied in yourself. The one who forces you to confront what you've repressed. Jung called this the shadow bond, the sacred yet dangerous union between two people whose darknesses fit together like puzzle pieces. It's not true love. It's psychological magnetism, the soul's way of saying, "Look here. This is where you're still divided." But we rarely see it that way. We romanticize the chaos. We chase the highs. We call the turbulence passion. And by the time we realize we've been circling our own shadow, we're already entangled. Yet this is not a tragedy. Because Jung also taught that through the mirror of another, even through heartbreak, we can awaken to our own unconscious. The shadow bond, if survived, can become the catalyst of individuation. It can destroy illusions and give birth to self-awareness. But first, you must see it for what it is. Not love, not soulmate, but a meeting of two inner worlds in desperate search of wholeness. So when the chemistry feels overwhelming, when you feel like you can't breathe without them, pause. Ask yourself, is this love or recognition? Are you drawn to who they are, or to the part of you they reflect? Because sometimes, what feels like destiny is really the soul's way of saying, it's time to meet yourself. The magnetic pull of the unconscious. Carl Jung believed that what we call chemistry is rarely random. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That pull you feel toward someone, that spark that defies reason, may not be a sign from the universe. It may be your unconscious trying to resolve something buried deep within you. When you meet someone who embodies the traits you've repressed, strength you never claimed, vulnerability you've hidden, chaos you feared, your psyche reacts as if it's found missing gold. The attraction is instant. It feels destined. But it's not love. It's recognition. You're not seeing them clearly. You're seeing the lost fragments of yourself dancing in their eyes. This is the secret Jung uncovered in the dynamics between men and women, between any two psyches drawn by unseen forces. He called it projection, the process by which we cast parts of our unconscious onto others. A man who has denied his emotional depth may find himself captivated by a woman who radiates feeling, intuition, mystery. He doesn't realize that what he truly desires is his own capacity to feel. A woman who has repressed her inner authority may find herself magnetically pulled to a man who seems powerful, certain, and self-contained, not knowing that this is her own power living outside her. In both cases, chemistry becomes a mirror, not a meeting. It's not love. It's psychological alchemy waiting to happen. But we often mistake it for destiny because it feels ancient. It feels like home because the energy is familiar. It's the same energy that once shaped your childhood, your earliest attachments, your unspoken wounds. The psyche recognizes the pattern, not the person. That's why the attraction can feel so intense, so irresistible. You're not falling in love with the present, you're being pulled back into your past. You're trying, unconsciously, to finish a story that was left incomplete. Think about it. Why do we crave what hurts us? Why do we chase people who can't love us the way we need? Why do we repeat what breaks us? Because deep down, the psyche longs for healing through repetition. It believes that if it can recreate the wound with a new face, maybe this time it can end differently. Maybe this time, love will fix what pain created. But it never does, not until consciousness enters the picture. Because the unconscious doesn't heal through repetition. It heals through awareness. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances." Yes, chemistry transforms, but transformation requires fire. And sometimes the fire is pain. When we project our inner world onto another, we give them power, the power to define, to hurt, to save us. That's why chemistry often feels both ecstatic and terrifying. It activates the deepest archetypes within us, the lover, the child, the rescuer, the victim. It wakes up everything that's been asleep. The unconscious doesn't care about comfort, cares about integration, and it will use the most magnetic people in your life to get your attention. You meet someone and suddenly your emotions erupt. You feel alive, creative, inspired, or obsessed, anxious, unstable. You think they've done something to you. But what's actually happening is that you've encountered your own soul through them. That's why some connections defy logic. Why they don't fade even when they should. They were never about the other person. They were about what the other person awakened. So when Jung warned about the shadow bond, he wasn't telling us to avoid deep connections. He was warning us to see clearly, to know when attraction is healing and when it's haunting. Because there's a difference between chemistry and connection. Chemistry is fire without direction. Connection is fire with awareness. One consumes you, the other transforms you. And so, when the next person walks into your life and everything in you lights up, pause. Don't rush to call it love. Ask instead, what part of me has just woken up? What is this person showing me about myself? Because sometimes, the soul doesn't send you a lover, it sends you a mirror. And until you see your reflection clearly, you'll keep calling your lessons love. When desire masks a wound, the emotional repetition compulsion, there's a particular kind of attraction that doesn't feel like a choice. It's sudden, intoxicating, a rush that sweeps through the body and silences reason. You meet someone, and your entire nervous system lights up, as if it's been waiting for them all along. You call it chemistry, but in Jungian terms it's something far older, far deeper. Because what we call chemistry often isn't about the person in front of us, it's about the pattern behind them. Jung once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But not all reactions create harmony. Some reactions expose the fault lines within us, the fractures we've hidden behind our mask. Freud called it the repetition compulsion, the unconscious urge to replay unresolved wounds. Jung took it further. He saw it as the psyche's attempt at healing through reenactment. The soul, he believed, will summon familiar pain until it's finally brought into consciousness. So when you feel an electric charge towards someone, that inexplicable magnetism that overrides logic, it may not be love at all. It may be recognition, not of a soulmate, but of a symbol. A person carrying the emotional code of a wound you haven't yet faced. You see, the psyche is like an unfinished symphony. Where there's unresolved pain, it keeps replaying the same note, hoping this time it will end differently. So the child who felt unseen might be drawn to lovers who are emotionally unavailable. The one who grew up walking on eggshells around anger might chase intensity and volatility as proof of love. And the one who was taught to earn affection might confuse self-sacrifice with devotion. We don't consciously choose these patterns. They choose us. That's why these bonds feel so faded. It's not out of nowhere. It's out of the unconscious. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's precisely what happens in these shadow bonds. We confuse chemistry with destiny, not realizing it's our inner child whispering, "Maybe this time, it'll end differently." But it never does, at least, not without awareness. Because what drives the attraction isn't the possibility of love, but the possibility of redemption. The psyche keeps pulling us toward the same wound, wearing a different face, begging for closure. It's why you can't stop thinking about someone who's bad for you. Why you crave their attention even when it hurts. Why you call it addiction, but it feels like home. Your body remembers. Your heart recognizes the rhythm of a familiar pain. It mistakes that familiarity for belonging. And so, chemistry becomes a kind of haunting, a ghost story written in your nervous system. Every intense connection is your unconscious saying, "Here. This is where it hurts." The tragedy is that most people stop at the surface, chasing the feeling rather than decoding it. They mistake anxiety for passion, tension for depth, danger for love. But once you look beneath the intensity, you begin to see it for what it is, the shadow trying to complete itself through relationship. In Jungian terms, these bonds are psychological mirrors. The other person reflects your disowned parts, your unhealed wounds, your repressed desires, your unspoken rage. You think you've met your match. In truth, you've met your mirror. And that's why it's both magnetic and unbearable, because to stay close to them is to stay close to everything inside you that you've tried to avoid. But there's power in recognizing the pattern. The moment you can say, "This isn't love, this is repetition," the spell begins to break. The charge loses its grip. Because now, the energy is no longer unconscious, it's seen. That's when true healing begins. When chemistry stops being a trap and starts being a teacher. The one who hurt you becomes the one who revealed you. The attraction, once a symptom, becomes an initiation, pulling you back into your own depths, asking you to meet the part of you that still bleeds. In Jung's language, this is the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Every painful attraction is an invitation to integrate the split-off part of the self, to see the abandoned child, the repressed emotion, the disowned longing, and bring it home. Then, desire no longer masks a wound, it becomes a bridge. You no longer seek someone to complete you, you seek to meet yourself through another. And the repetition stops because the lesson has been learned. So the next time you feel that instant, breathless chemistry, that gravitational pull that feels like soulmate energy, pause. Ask yourself not what they awaken in you, but what they awaken from you. Is it love or is it memory? Is it connection or is it compulsion? Is it expansion or is it your shadow reaching for light? Because when you can name the wound beneath the desire, you transform the pattern. You stop being drawn to pain and start being drawn to peace. And in that shift, the chemistry remains. But this time, it's conscious. The alchemy of awareness, turning shadow attraction into conscious connection. If you've ever looked back on someone who broke you and thought, "Why did I stay? Why couldn't I leave sooner?" Jung would tell you, because a part of you wasn't ready to wake up yet. Awareness isn't born from peace. It's born from collision. from being pulled apart by forces you don't yet understand, until the pain becomes so unbearable, the only way out is inward. That's the moment when the unconscious begins to stir, when what was hidden beneath desire begins to show its true face. The one you loved wasn't your destiny, they were your reflection. And through that reflection, the soul begins its alchemy. Jung often described love as the great laboratory of the psyche, a crucible where light and shadow melt into one another, burning away illusions until only truth remains. When chemistry becomes conscious, it turns from a wound into wisdom. It no longer seeks to replay the past, it seeks to understand it. And that shift, from reaction to reflection, is where transformation begins. In this stage, awareness feels both liberating and devastating. You begin to see the person you once idolized through a clearer lens. The spell fades, the magical bond weakens. And yet, strangely, you begin to love them more, not for what they gave you, but for what they revealed. Because every moment of heartbreak carries within it a seed of awakening. When you suffer consciously, you begin to sense what Jung called the self, the deeper intelligence of the psyche that orchestrates your evolution. It's not punishing you through repetition. It's showing you where you're still fragmented, where love must begin within you before it can ever be sustained with another. When awareness enters the bond, the dynamic changes completely. You no longer chase to be chosen. You no longer crave validation from someone who cannot see you. Instead, you turn inward and ask, what part of me keeps asking for love from places that cannot give it? That question is the philosopher's stone, the catalyst of inner alchemy. Because when you begin to love the very parts of you that once begged for attention, you take back your power from those who misused it. You stop bleeding from your wounds and start healing from them. And suddenly, you realize, the love you were looking for in another was the love your shadow needed from you. In Jungian terms, this is the process of integration, uniting the conscious and the unconscious, the wounded child and the mature self, the craving heart and the observing soul. And when that happens, something sacred occurs. The magnetic pull toward destruction fades, and in its place arises a calm, radiant form of attraction, one that is rooted in wholeness. You begin to sense what Jung called eros, not lust or infatuation, but the archetypal force of connection itself, a current that moves between souls who have faced themselves and survived. This kind of love doesn't burn, it illuminates. It doesn't drain, it grounds. It doesn't demand, it understands. Because it's no longer built on unconscious need, but on conscious recognition. Imagine two people, both having met their shadows, both aware of their projections, both responsible for their wounds. When they meet, they don't consume each other. They see each other. They know love is not escape, but exposure. It's not fantasy, but integration. It's the meeting of two flames that burn clearly, not wildly. That's what Jung meant when he said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. True transformation doesn't come from chemistry, it comes from consciousness. And here lies the essence of Jung's alchemy. The same desire that once led you to destruction can become the fire that refines you. The same longing that made you chase can teach you stillness. The same wound that once drew you to pain can become the gateway to peace. In awareness, nothing is wasted. Every heartbreak, every obsession, every painful almost becomes a teacher, an instrument of individuation. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start whispering, "What is this showing me?" That is the alchemy of awareness, to turn longing into learning, to turn repetition into revelation, to turn the shadow bond into sacred understanding. And perhaps the greatest miracle of all, you learn that real love doesn't begin with finding the right person. It begins with becoming the one who no longer confuses pain with passion, and chaos with connection. The shadow's gift. How painful bonds awaken the soul. If you look back on your life, you'll notice something quietly extraordinary. The people who changed you the most were rarely the ones who made you feel safe. They were the ones who broke you open, the ones who triggered you, challenged you, left you shattered in silence, the ones who made you question your worth, your strength, your very identity. And yet, in that very breaking, something sacred began to move, a slow, luminous birth of awareness that only pain could have delivered. Jung called this the shadow's gift, the way in which darkness becomes a path toward light. When two unconscious psyches collide, the impact is never random. Each carries within it a set of unhealed archetypes, unspoken fears, and unintegrated desires, and when those meet, they ignite the soul's deepest process of transformation. You might call it heartbreak. Jung would call it initiation, because the shadow, once activated through relationship, refuses to be ignored. It forces confrontation. It drags buried truths into the open, truths about who you are, what you believe love should be, and how much of yourself you've hidden just to be loved. It doesn't ask for politeness. It demands honesty. It says, look, this is what you've become by running from what you are. Every time the wrong person awakens your deepest pain, the psyche is actually trying to restore its balance. It brings the wound to the surface because the soul cannot heal what remains unseen. And this is the paradox. Pain is not the opposite of healing, it is the beginning of it. The relationships that collapse in fire are often the ones that burn away everything that was false. They strip you down to what's real, to the bare, trembling essence of your being. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That is the purpose of the shadow bond, to make your darkness conscious, through love, through loss, through longing. Most people fear their shadow because it speaks in the language of discomfort. But those who dare to listen realize something profound. The shadow doesn't come to destroy you, it comes to deliver you. It delivers you from the illusions that hold you prisoner, from the fantasy of perfect love, from the belief that someone else will fix what's broken inside you, from the endless chase for completion outside yourself. When you stop resisting the lesson and begin to see the intelligence beneath the pain, you understand that every heartbreak was a message from the self, the deepest part of your psyche, urging you to wake up. Think of it this way: in every failed relationship, you meet a different fragment of your own soul. The manipulator teaches you boundaries. The avoidant teaches you presence. The unavailable teaches you self-worth. The cruel one teaches you compassion, not for them, but for yourself. Each encounter draws a map of your evolution, written in emotional ink. And when you finally see it, truly see it, you realize that none of it was wasted. Every person you lost was a guide in disguise, every wound a doorway into your depth, every ending an initiation into selfhood. Jung believed the psyche's ultimate goal was wholeness, not happiness. And wholeness demands inclusion, of the light and the dark, the wound and the wisdom, the victim and the survivor. When you integrate all these parts, love stops being an escape from loneliness and becomes a mirror of your completeness. You no longer seek someone to fill your void. You meet others from the overflow of your fullness. You no longer chase connection, you embody it. Because now you see, what you once called chemistry was never the sign of love, it was the soul signaling where you needed to awaken. The shadow's gift, then, is the ability to love without illusion. To stand before another human being not in need, but in truth. To say, "I see you, not as my savior, not as my wound, but as a fellow traveler in the great experiment of becoming." That's when the game changes. Because now, love becomes a spiritual act. Not two halves seeking wholeness, but two wholes sharing awareness. That's the kind of connection Jung envisioned when he spoke of Eros as sacred energy, a unifying force that elevates both souls beyond projection, beyond dependency, into communion. The pain that once felt like a curse was actually your initiation. The chemistry that once enslaved you has become consciousness. And the shadow that once haunted you now walks beside you, as guide, not ghost. This is the moment of transcendence. You no longer ask for love to heal you. You offer love because you are healed. That is the shadow's final gift. It turns suffering into sovereignty. It turns heartbreak into humility. It turns darkness into the very light that guides others home. From shadow to self. In the end, Jung didn't warn us against love. He warned us against forgetting what love truly is. When chemistry strikes like lightning, it's easy to believe we've found the one, that cosmic spark we've been waiting for. But as Jung saw it, chemistry alone doesn't bind souls, it binds wounds. What we call chemistry is often the unconscious calling out, the shadow whispering, "Here is the one who can help you see me." And if we mistake that whisper for destiny, we'll find ourselves caught in the same storm again and again, drawn to the familiar ache, chasing the same impossible redemption. Real love, Jung would say, begins only when we step out of the unconscious spell. When we stop demanding our partner to heal what we've never faced within ourselves. When we see them not as a savior or a mirror, but as a companion on the same journey of becoming whole. Because what the shadow really wants isn't another person, it's your attention. It's the unloved parts of you asking to be seen, held, and integrated. Once you give them that, once you bring the unconscious into light, the magnetic pull of unhealthy attraction loses its power. The irony is that when you stop chasing chemistry, you make space for connection. The kind that doesn't burn, but sustains. The kind that isn't rooted in wounds, but in awareness. So, the next time you feel that electric spark, pause. Ask yourself, is this love, or is this my shadow reaching out? Because sometimes, the soul doesn't draw you to the one you're meant to keep, it draws you to the one you're meant to wake up through. And that, perhaps, is Jung's truest warning, and his greatest gift. That even our most painful bonds are not punishments, but invitations. Invitations to see ourselves clearly, to love consciously, and to turn chemistry into understanding.